Hello everyone, what's up? Long time no see. In this video I'm going to show you how I painted the Horus Heresy Death Guard Legion of white and dark green without using any GW paints or any other water-based paints for that matter. If you're looking for an efficient way to airbrush your models without suffering from dry tip or clogging, this video is for you. Since I started the Race for Terra back in May 2020, what I've been trying to show to people is an alternative way to paint wargaming models which is time efficient, stress-free, and which can help anybody achieve a gritty, realistic finish. My motto has always been, if I can do it, so can you. With that in mind, this Contemptor is hardly an award-winning piece, but I hope that you agree that it looks pretty good. Most importantly though, I hope that you find it evocative of the tragic corruption of the Death Guard Legion during the Horus Heresy. An inner corruption, which was first displayed through seemingly mundane symptoms like seeping rust. Now, it may surprise you to learn that I didn't use any of the techniques or products traditionally associated with Warhammer to paint this model. For starters, I didn't use a single Citadel product. I also didn't use what people call paint recipes. When people ask me about my recipe for dark gray, for example, it makes me laugh. Why? Well, normally I use like 1 or 2 paints and maybe add this or that as a highlight, and that's it. That's why you won't be finding any long list of products in my videos. I also didn't use layering, or contrast paints, or glazes, or edge highlighting, or acrylic washes. You see where I'm headed with this? So what is it that I did use then? Well, as some of you already know, I predominantly use products and techniques which come from the field of scale modeling, not Warhammer. But enough with the lecture already, you say? Okay, let me show you an example of how it works. This is what the Contemptor looked like prior to this step. If you're wondering how the rust effects are so realistic, the reason for that is that, well, they aren't effects. Just like I did with my down ATST, I applied a product called Ammo U Rust in small patches. This product is a paste which has iron particles in it and creates not only texture, but actual rust. So yeah, this doesn't look like rust, it is rust. So how the heck is this gonna work then? Well, the plan is pretty simple. I'm going to paint over this and then create actual scratches and actual chips in the paint, which will reveal the red-brown undercoat and with it, those grungy patches of rust. Do you like the sound of that? Well then, let's get airbrushing, shall we? These here are the paints that I'm going to use to represent the iconic Death Guard of white. The paint on the left is Tamiya Flat White, which is a solvent-based acrylic, not water-based, and the one on the right is AK Real Colors of White, which is a lacquer paint. I will be diluting both with this AK Thinner, which is also basically a solvent. As you can see, the AK paint is really beige or kind of yellow, so my idea was to roughly do 2 parts white to 1 part of white. And in any case, I always do around 50% thinner to 50% paint whenever I use these. However, the resulting mix was too dark for my taste, so I added a bit more white and also a bit more thinner to keep the consistency the same. As usual, I forgot to press record when I started painting, which is why the model already has a bit of white at the beginning. If you have ever airbrushed white, you will know that it can be a huge pain to get right. In fact, it's kind of infamous. If you watch closely, you will notice 2 things here. First, that the initial slightly grainy look is giving way to a nice, uniform layer of white. And second, that I'm spraying a very, very thin coat of white paint, but doing it continuously. In other words, I'm pulling very, very little on the trigger, and yet I seem to be able to spray pretty much non-stop, rather than in small bursts. In turn, this is allowing me to have fine control and also to build up opacity very slowly and gradually. But what is unique about that, you may ask? Well, if this were an acrylic paint, by that I mean a water-based acrylic, what I'm doing right now would be nigh impossible. I would have to either spray more aggressively and thin the paint within an inch of its life, risking major problems like spiderwebbing, or else I would have to stop like every 30 seconds due to dry tip. And these are the white panels finished. The first scratch that you can see was a happy accident, but there were many more chips and scratches to follow. As you can see, even the parts with the texture rust have been covered without any issues. In any case, let us move on to the dark green panels, shall we? So, behold my ugly but effective masking. As you can see, both the knee and the shoulder areas have had a lot of rust applied to them, and you can probably tell that the rust has a different, more garish tone. Having done the same with this Arquitor Bombard from back in 2020, I knew that Tamiya olive green mixed with a little off-white would be just about right for that iconic Death Guard green. Not too desaturated, as would be the case if you added pure white, but also not as bright as yellow would have made it. Most importantly, I added around 50% thinner once again, I gave it a good mix, and I checked the consistency. As you can see, spraying this green was super easy, and I didn't have to be as restrained with the trigger as I was with the white. In just a few seconds, I had already achieved full opacity with each pauldron. The knee panels were no different, and I was pretty happy with my masking. It looked like an ugly mess, but I knew it'd do the trick. Time for some highlights, by the way. I just added a few drops of off-white and a lot more thinner to the mix, and I went to town. This allows you to create a subtle, semi-transparent highlight if you like, but without either dry tip or spider webbing problems. If you're enjoying this video, guys, consider joining the Resforterra YouTube membership, which starts at only €0.99 a month. And if you join the mid or top tiers, you'll have access to exclusive members-only videos, the first of which is a detailed 14-minute video where I share my secrets for using real rust as an undercoat to your models, same as I did with this Contemptor Dreadnought. In today's video, I really wanted to focus on the advantages of using lacquers and other solvent-based paints for your base coats. But of course there is life after base coating. If you're wondering what happened after, these are roughly the steps that I followed. As you may have guessed already, prior to spraying the white or the green, I had applied chipping fluid. Then, after base coating, I applied first water and then friction to create chips and scratches, revealing the rust under the surface. If you want to know more about this, by the way, you can check out my video on heavy chipping. Anyway, after that, it was time to apply decals, and then to do all kinds of mean things to them in order to make them appear worn out. What next? Oh yes, an enamel wash. The metals I painted by hand and off camera, and then also applied an enamel wash to them. Applying streaking effects was great fun, possibly what I enjoyed the most. The base, however, was a job unto itself, and I think that deserves a separate video. Right after recording the rest of this video, I realized that there was an important element that I had forgotten to discuss: safety. Now, I have said this numerous times in the past, but let me reiterate it. Both lacquers and any paints that have solvents in them, like those in the Tamiya XF range, are toxic if inhaled, so make sure to invest in a respirator mask and an extractor airbrush booth before you start using them. Yes, I know that this will set you back around €200, but that's well worth it, trust me. Another thing I wanted to mention is that I recently followed a discussion about acrylic inks in my Discord. In a nutshell, white acrylic inks can be super useful if what you want is a clean, pearl white finish, like some people like for their white scars, for example. Inks will allow you to circumvent the worst problems that spraying white with acrylic paints creates. You know, the constant clogging and dry tip that I mentioned before. However, a white acrylic ink wouldn't really work for an off-white finish, and it also wouldn't lend itself to heavy chipping. So while I'm aware that inks can be great for some cases, it's not really the right tool for a heavily weathered finish. Horses for courses, in other words. By the way, my YouTube members only video this month is a summary of the Horus Heresy narrative event that I ran a few weeks ago, the Breaking of Anvilus. Thanks again to all those involved with the event, both physically and from a distance. In particular, I'd like to thank Nick, Rick, Niklas, and Joe for their generous contributions. And speaking of YouTube members, I would like to thank each and every one of you. You guys help me keep the lights on, and your support means a lot to me. That's all from me for now, but remember, keep it up and weather it out.